So a technique in employment law, if people aren't behaving themselves, is you have a meeting or don't have a meeting as the case may be, and after the meeting, regardless of how it went, you follow up and say, well, this is how the meeting went, and you then give them the room to challenge it. So if what you said was dishonest or even wrong in the slightest way, you can give them however much time is reasonable to come back and correct the record, because this is what we do in a civilised society. As a bureaucrat, you can't just hide and refuse to speak. It's part of your job. You have to have a duty of candour, otherwise your pension gets taken away and you go to jail. So in terms of meetings at the moment, the current problem is the last meeting was comparing the managing director of Birmingham City Council to the eponymous Poochie from The Simpsons. So in The Simpsons, of course, this character is created. They're a complete disaster, and some reason has to be concocted as to why they vanished into the mist. So given this has happened to Chris Naylor, Cadman, God knows she was a disaster, and now the current managing director has just had a throat cut. It's a bit of embarrassing, sort of three strikes and you're out for John Cotton. But the problem, of course, is Gold Commander is currently in Birmingham University doing secret missions, except that his secret missions are a bit too slow, I think, because arresting people like Andrews for setting off the pogroms should have been done a while ago because he's quite dangerous. But unfortunately, Gold Commander has thus far failed to resolve the problem, and that's probably because if you actually chase the chain back, so if they had a credible philosophy department, it is as Tick and Lindsay describes. There's your original source. You've got a source of conflict which cannot be resolved, and you have people with a vested interest in terms of money and power just playing with sort of action figures, mashing the two sides into each other and watching them fight because you can make money off the conflict. This is an old strategy, throughout time, but because it's now happening in Birmingham because of effectively foreign subversion, the law is completely broken down. So when you're going down to the Hollow Leviathan panel, you are making the correct connection that this thing is currently hollow. So the flag shows there is an agent of the British State Home to enforce order here. So if you go in with a group of lads to try and take the castle, you probably won't live very long. You'll probably be taken out. But these guys can't hold Britain. So in terms of securing your polis, you'd have to get troops back from Estonia effectively, and this is part of a NATO strategy, so that's probably not going to happen. So civilian defence at the moment is a bit iffy, to say the least. So when you're saying to a guy off the brink, well, it doesn't take a genius to get a rifle and an FPV drone, both of these are totally legal, by the way, weight limits and such, and you've then got a man plus a spotter, totally fine under British law, so you can look after your own community. Give it 20 years ago, of course, nobody would have talked about this kind of stuff, but you're sitting in a main conference hall with members of the House of Lords and everyone's nodding in agreement. This is perfectly reasonable. I mean, if a Ukrainian drone gets smuggled across the border and flies down, we're having a militia trained with rifles to get rid of the damn thing. It's probably quite useful, isn't it? The ring of steel, I suppose, makes one feel a bit more secure, but you would hope that the British state is looking at this seriously and looking at this in terms of a strategic threat. So in the political arena, which the military guys are saying is where the problem is, if you can't have an adult conversation, then, good luck. How's that going to go for you? The way things currently stand, it is just a case that Birmingham, because of the Sovietisation and because this conference is now looking at that policy specifically, if you can go and find these people, you can solve the mysteries. They have no leg to stand on. Their feet are hollow. So they're standing above a tunnel thinking they've got this institutional legitimacy that's going to save them. But as soon as anybody comes up, a child asking questions, the floor just goes. Right? They're standing on mush, effectively. So it's not a Leninist strategy, it's a counter-Leninist strategy. When you go into mush, just keep stabbing. We're now going against the managing director who's been hiding since last year. I was sitting on that statue again as a reminder. You can't even see in the Scottish winter, having booked it out with a painting and a bit of shrapnel, because the city she was running was so corrupt and dangerous. If you think at the end of 42 years and 17 years in overseeing committee services, looking at how Birmingham Labour is run, plus actually running your compliance department, if you think we can't catch these sort of low-level gangster efforts, you're delusional. And when your current effort is such a danger to the entire country and Europe as a whole, and therefore civilization. I perhaps think people like Bridget Jones, Chris Naylor, these guys just being able to vanish like Poochie into the ether is not really how British public bodies should be run. So one of the great comments on the over the weekend was Rishi Sunak's gap year. So this was the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom who's running the country, has buggered off to a Californian company or something because he has no loyalty to the country itself. And this is, of course, disgraceful behaviour. It's totally embarrassing. He's made this terrible mess, said I can't fix it, and left. There's a certain duty of candour when leaving, and if you're saying, well, the ECHR was the problem, well, leave as you're being told to, this kind of stuff. So there's no excuse. This is clearly a deliberate attack on the country. We've got prime ministers being deliberately placed in against the will of the electorates. But the good thing about Burnham is we forced him on the ground. So we were there in Makerfield battling him. This guy was never seen, so the guy is just a postmodernist piece of fluff. He's currently in Ukraine in a polo shirt, and you counter his entire strategy just by finding members of Birmingham Labour. Right? That's all you need to do. Nothing else. Just find these people, stick a camera in their face, ask them any questions you like. Be as offensive as you like, be as crude, this city of rats and filth. But when the rats in the chain inferences go forth, we've got a clean area here, so this place just contains less Brummies. You're far less likely to be violently assaulted than you would be staying in Birmingham because of the breakdown of law and order. Therefore, we can conduct legal proceedings here safely, and they are done because they're proximity locked and they can't come here because they're all dishonest. So take this one inference what you like, but as we were saying to colleagues over the weekend, the people they're not worried about are the people with weapons and FPV drones, because generally they're on the side of the government. They're saying that agreeing with the army at this point is just that this cannot be resolved unless the British state can be forced to be honest, and it cannot be forced to be honest unless there is authority of the state, right? So Burnham just clearly doesn't have any authority, is carrying on with the kabuki. But you bring it down via domestic issues. So your domestic issue is Birmingham. Pull apart the theatre productions, and you have effectively the North Korea of Britain. This is a Sovietized city now that is run on a certain kind of a Murtaugh-like silence. It's just that they can't do that anymore because this is in the sky. They can't shoot it down. So it's an interesting time to be alive, but we hope we can sort things out sensibly in terms of a British counter-revolution. But it will be via mercy in this case. A single artillery piece, point that thing at the council house, don't even need to load it, take the shell out, and to make it quite clear that the authority of the state is coming from Westminster. The authority will do as it's told. So if agents from Westminster are coming into the local authority asking questions, if they're being threatened or attacked, these people have been instantly removed by police. So auditor comes into the sort of building we're in over the weekends. This is like a pod, right? You walk in over here and all your material needs are met. It's like effectively like living in Eden, effectively. If I want water or food, I pick it up, and it's all climate controlled, this kind of stuff. Because you need to be in effectively the pod to discuss the country at this point. So you're around people who aren't going to attack you because they're at a level of functioning that I get into trouble for using a water cup as a coffee cup. And these are the sort of people who are discussing the way the state is governed. We have reached a totally untenable position for the British state, but the lack of statutory inquiry, of course, doesn't go back to Birmingham because of John Cotton's client groups. Because these people are so dangerous when being told there is no such thing as equity, they've now got a security situation which they have no control of. And as soon as people are intelligent enough to work this out, it may kick off. So, I don't know. I mean, there is one clear way to deal with the current Leviathan situation, which is fairly obvious to anybody who does look at the history of the English Civil War. If you look at the history of the English Civil War, we are doing the same thing, just very, very quickly. So if the 55 days example is played out again, 55 days from now, Charlie's up in Edinburgh, you can see a position where the British are pretty angry with him and his family, and things are, in a historical sense, pretty interesting. But anyway, this is another recording for Deborah to answer when she's thinking about legal proceedings and City Council's recalcitrant bureaucrats in the office of the City Solicitor. But if you are seeking legal advice within Birmingham, the official advice is sorry, the British state has no authority.